Hi there and happy Friday. We are starting a new book, The Magic of Oz by L. Frank Baum. I'm Mary Logue, librarian at the Claremont Branch Library, and this is our 13th Oz book that we are going to be reading together. If you've read the others, great. If you haven't, no problem. You don't need to read them to enjoy this book. This is, as I said, the 13th book in the Oz series by L. Frank Baum. And in this book, we're going to meet Kiki Aru, who's a Munchkin boy who learns a magic word. And let me just say that magic word is very hard to pronounce. So bear with me as I read through the book with that. But with this magic word and his friendship with the Gnome King, they decide they are going to try to conquer the land of Oz. Also, during this time, other people in Oz are looking for the perfect gift for Ozma's birthday. So it's a fun book, interesting journey. Again, Oz is in peril as someone's trying to conquer it. So let's go ahead and start with our new book, The Magic of Oz by L. Frank Baum. So this is Chapter 1, Mount Munch. On the east edge of the land of Oz, in the Munchkin country, is a big, tall hill called Mount Munch. On one side, the bottom of this hill just touches the deadly sandy desert that separates the fairyland of Oz from all the rest of the world. But on the other side, the hill touches the beautiful, fertile country of the Munchkins. The Munchkin folks, however, merely stand off and look at Mount Munch and know very little about it, for about a third of the way up, its sides become too steep to climb, and if any people live upon the top of that great towering peak that seems to reach nearly to the skies, the Munchkins are not aware of that fact. But people do live there just the same. The top of Mount Munch is shaped like a saucer, broad and deep, and in the saucer are fields where grains and vegetables grow, and flocks are fed, and brooks flow, and trees bear all sorts of things. There are houses scattered here and there, each having its family of high-ups, as the people call themselves. The high-ups seldom go down the mountain, for the same reason that the Munchkins never climb up. The sides are too steep. In one of the houses lived a wise old high-up named Binny Aru, who used to be a clever sorcerer. But Ozma of Oz, who rules everyone in the land of Oz, had made a decree that no one should practice magic in her dominions except Glinda the Good and the Wizard of Oz. And when Glinda sent this royal command to the high-ups by means of a strong-winged eagle, old Binny Aru at once stopped performing magical arts. He destroyed many of his magical powders and tools of magic, and afterward honestly obeyed the law. He had never seen Ozma, but he knew she was his ruler and must be obeyed. There was only one thing that grieved him. He had discovered a new and secret method of transformations that was unknown to any other sorcerer. Glinda the Good did not know it, nor did the little Wizard of Oz, nor Dr. Pippet, nor old Mombi, nor anyone else who dealt in the magic arts. It was Binny Aru's own secret. By its means, it was the simplest thing in the world to transform anyone into a beast, bird, or fish, or anything else, and back again, once you knew how to pronounce the mystical word Pyres-Quixkle. Binny Aru had used this secret many times, but not to cause evil or suffering to others. When he had wandered far from home and was hungry, he would say, "I want to become a cow, Pyres-Quixkle." In an instant, he would be a cow, and then he would eat grass and satisfy his hunger. All the beasts and birds can talk in the land of Oz, so when the cow was no longer hungry, it would say, "I want to be Binny Aru again, Pyres-Quixkle," and the magic word, properly pronounced, would instantly restore him to his proper form. Now, of course, I dare not write down the magic word so plainly if I thought my readers would pronounce it properly, and so be able to transform themselves and others. But it is a fact that no one in all the world except Binny Aru had ever, up until the time this story begins, been able to pronounce Pyrrhusquiscal in the right way. So I think it is safe to give to you. It might be well, however, in reading this story aloud, to be careful not to pronounce Pyrrhusquiscal in the proper way, and thus avoid all danger of the secret being able to work mischief. Bini Aru, having discovered the secret of instant transformation, which required no tools or powders or other chemicals or herbs, and always worked perfectly, was reluctant to have such a wonderful discovery entirely unknown or lost to all human knowledge. He decided not to use it again, since Ozma had forbidden him to do so, but he reflected that Ozma was a girl and sometime might change her mind and allow her subjects to practice magic, in which case Bini Aru could again transform himself and others at will, unless, of course, he forgot how to pronounce Pyrrhusquiscal in the meantime. After giving the matter careful thought, he decided to write the word and how it should be pronounced in some secret place, so that he could find it after many years, but where no one else could ever find it. That was a clever idea, but what bothered the old sorcerer was to find a secret place. He wandered all over the saucer at the top of Mount Munch, but found no place to write the secret word where others might not be likely to stumble upon it. So he finally decided it must be written somewhere in his own house. Bini Aru had a wife named Mopsy Aru, who was famous for making fine huckleberry pies, and he had a son named Kiki Aru, who was not famous at all. He was noted as being cross and disagreeable because he was not happy, and he was not happy because he wanted to go down the mountain and visit the big world below, and his father would not let him. No one paid any attention to Kiki Aru because he didn't amount to anything anyway. Once a year, there was a festival on Mount Munch, which all the high-ups attended. It was held in the center of the saucer-shaped country, and the day was given over to feasting and merrymaking. The young folks danced and sang songs, the women spread the tables with good things to eat, and the men played on musical instruments and told fairy tales. Kiki Aru usually went to these festivals with his parents, and then sat sullenly outside the circle and would not dance or sing or even talk to other young people. So the festival did not make him any happier than other days. But this time he told Bini Aru and Mopsy Aru that he would not go. He would rather stay at home and be unhappy all by himself, he said, and so they gladly let him stay. But after he was left alone, Kiki decided to enter his father's private room, where he was forbidden to go, and see if he could find any of the magic tools Bini Aru used to work when he practiced sorcery. As he went in, Kiki stubbed his toe on one of the floorboards. He searched everywhere, but found no trace of his father's magic. All had been destroyed. Much disappointed, he started to go out again when he stubbed his toe on the same floorboard. That set him thinking. Examining the board more closely, Kiki found it had been pried up and then nailed down again in such a manner that it was a little higher than the other boards. But why had his father taken up the board? Had he hidden some of his magic tools underneath the floor? Kiki got a chisel and pried up the board, but found nothing under it. He was just about to replace the board when it slipped from his hands and turned over, and he saw something written on the underside of it. The light was rather dim, so he took the board to the window and examined it, and found that the writing described exactly how to pronounce the word Pyrrhusquiscal, which would transform anyone into anything instantly and back again when the word was repeated. Now, at first, Kiki Aru didn't realize what a wonderful secret he had discovered, but he thought it might be of some use to him, and so he took a piece of paper and made out on it an exact copy of the instructions for pronouncing Pyrrhusquiscal. Then he folded the paper and put it in his pocket and replaced the board in the floor so that no one would suspect it had been removed. After this, Kiki went into the garden and, sitting beneath a tree, made a careful study of the paper. He had always wanted to get away from Mount Munch and visit the big world, especially the land of Oz, and the idea now came to him that if he could transform himself into a bird, he could fly to any place he wished to go and fly back again whenever he cared to. It was necessary, however, to learn by heart the way to pronounce the magic word, because a bird would have no way to carry a paper with it, and Kiki would be unable to resume his proper shape if he forgot the word or its pronunciation. So he studied it a long time, repeating it 100 times in his mind, until he was sure he would not forget it. But to make safety doubly sure, he placed the paper in a tin box in a neglected part of the garden and covered the box with small stones. By this time, it was getting late in the day, and Kiki wished to attempt his first transformation before his parents returned from the festival. So he stood on the front porch of his home and said, "I want to become a big, strong bird like a hawk, Pyrrhus Quickskull." He pronounced it the right way, so in a flash, he felt that he was completely changed in form. He flapped his wings, hopped to the porch railing, and said, "Cow! Cow!" Then he laughed and said half aloud, "I suppose that's the funny sort of sound that a bird makes. But let me now try my wings and see if I'm strong enough to fly across the desert." For he had decided to make his first trip to the country outside the land of Oz. He had stolen the secret of transformation, and he knew he had disobeyed the law of Oz by working magic. Perhaps Glenda or the Wizard of Oz would discover him and punish him, so it would be good policy to keep away from Oz altogether. Slowly, Kiki rose into the air and, resting on his broad wings, floated in graceful circles above the saucer-shaped mountaintop. From his height, he could see far across the burning sands of the deadly desert, another country that might be pleasant to explore. So he headed that way, and with strong, steady strokes of his wings, he began the long flight. Chapter 2: The Hawk. Even a hawk has to fly high in order to cross the deadly desert, from which poisonous fumes are constantly rising. Kiki Aru felt sick and faint by the time he reached good land again, for he could not quite escape the effects of the poisons. But the fresh air soon restored him, and he alighted in the broad tableland, which is called Highland. Just beyond it is a valley known as Lowland, and these two countries are ruled by the gingerbread man, John Doe, with Chick the Cherub as his prime minister. The hawk merely stopped here long enough to rest. Then he flew north, passed over a fine country called Maryland, which is ruled by a lovely wax doll. Then, following the curve of the desert, he turned north and settled on a treetop in the kingdom of No-Land. Kiki was tired by this time, and the sun was now setting, so he decided to remain here till morning. From his treetop, he could see a house nearby, which looked very comfortable. A man was milking a cow in the yard, and a pleasant-faced woman came to the door and called him to supper. That made Kiki wonder what sort of food hawks ate. He felt hungry, but he didn't know what to eat or where to get it. Also, he thought a bed would be more comfortable than a treetop for sleeping. So he hopped to the ground and said, "I want to become Kiki Aru again, Pyrrhus Quickskull." Instantly, he had resumed his natural shape, and going to the house, he knocked upon the door and asked for some supper. "Who are you?" asked the man of the house. "A stranger from the land of Oz," replied Kiki Aru. "Then you are welcome," said the man. Kiki was given a good supper and a good bed, and he behaved very well, although he refused to answer all the questions the good people of No-Land asked him. Having escaped from his home and found a way to see the world, the young man was no longer unhappy, and so he was no longer cross and disagreeable. The people thought him a very respectable person, and gave him breakfast next morning, after which he started on his way, feeling quite contented. Having walked for an hour or two through the pretty country that is ruled by King Bud, Kiki Aru decided he could travel faster and see more as a bird, so he transformed himself into a white dove and visited the great city of Nole, and saw the king's palace and gardens and many other places of interest. Then he flew westward to the kingdom of Ix, and after a day in Queen Zixie's country, went on west to the land of Ev. Every place he visited he thought was much more pleasant than the saucer country of the High-Ups, and he decided that when he reached the finest country of all, he would settle there and enjoy his future life to the utmost. In the land of Ev, he resumed his own shape again, for the cities and villages were close together, and he could easily go on foot from one to the other of them. Toward evening, he came to a good inn and asked the innkeeper if he could have food and lodging. You can if you have the money to pay, said the man. Otherwise, you must go elsewhere. This surprised Kiki, for in the land of Oz they do not use money at all, everyone being allowed to take what he wishes without price. He had no money, therefore, and so he turned away and to seek hospitality elsewhere. Looking through an open window into one of the rooms of the inn, as he passed along, he saw an old man counting on a table a big heap of gold pieces, which Kiki thought to be money. One of these would buy him supper and a bed, he reflected, so he transformed himself into a magpie, and flying through the open window, caught up one of the gold pieces in his beak and flew out again before the old man could interfere. Indeed, the old man who was robbed was quite helpless, for he dared not leave his pile of gold to chase the magpie, and before he could place the gold in a sack and the sack in his pocket, the robber bird was out of sight, and to seek it would be folly. Kiki Aru flew up to the ground of a group of trees, dropping the gold piece to the ground, resumed his proper shape, and then picked up the money and put it in his pocket. "You'll be sorry for this," exclaimed a small voice just over his head. Kiki looked up and saw that a sparrow perched upon a branch was watching him. "Sorry for what?" he demanded. "Oh, I saw the whole thing," asserted the sparrow. "I saw you look in the window, the gold, and then make yourself into a magpie and rob the poor man. Then I saw you fly here and make the bird into your former shape. That's magic, and magic is wicked and unlawful. And you stole money, and that's a still greater crime. You'll be sorry some day." "I don't care," replied Kiki Aru, scowling. "Aren't you afraid to be wicked?" asked the sparrow. "No, I didn't know I was being wicked," said Kiki. "But if I was, I'm glad of it. I hate good people. I've always wanted to be wicked, but I didn't know how." "Ha, ha, ha!" laughed someone behind him in a big voice. "That's the proper spirit, my lad. I'm glad I've met you. Shake hands." The sparrow gave a frightened squeak and flew away. Chapter 3. Two Bad Ones. Kiki Aru turned around and saw a queer old man standing near. He didn't stand straight, for he was crooked. He had a fat body and thin legs and arms. He had a big round face with bushy white whiskers that came to a point below his waist, and white hair that came to a point on the top of his head. He wore dull gray clothes that were tight-fitting, and his pockets were all bunched out, as if stuffed full of something. "I didn't know you were here," said Kiki. "I didn't come until after you did," said the queer old man. "Who are you?" asked Kiki. "My name's Ruggedo. I used to be the Gnome King, but I got kicked out of my country, and now I'm a wanderer." "What made them kick you out?" inquired the high-up boy. "Well, it's the fashion to kick kings out nowadays. I was a pretty good king, to myself, but those dreadful Oz people wouldn't let me alone, so I had to abdicate." "What does that mean?" "It means to be kicked out. But let's talk about something pleasant. Who are you, and where did you come from?" "I'm called Kiki Aru. I used to live on Mount Munch, in the land of Oz, but now I'm a wanderer like yourself." The Gnome King gave him a shrewd look. "I heard that bird say that you transformed yourself into a magpie and back again. Is it true?" Kiki hesitated, but he saw no reason to deny it. He felt that it would make him appear more important. "Well, yes," he said. "Then you're a wizard." "No, I only understand transformations," he admitted. "Well, that's pretty good magic anyhow," declared old Ruggedo. I used to have some very fine magic myself, but my enemies took it all away from me. Where are you going now?" "I'm going to go into the inn to get some supper and a bed," said Kiki. "Have you the money to pay for it?" asked the gnome. "I have 1 gold piece, which you stole. Very good, and you're glad that you're wicked. Better yet. I like you, young man, and I'll go to the inn with you if you'll promise not to eat eggs for supper." "Don't you like eggs?" asked Kiki. "I'm afraid of them. They're dangerous," said Brigotto, with a shudder. "All right," agreed Kiki. "I won't ask for eggs." "Then come along," said the gnome. When they entered the inn, the landlord scowled at Kiki and said, "I told you I would not feed you unless you had money." Kiki showed him the gold piece. "And how about you?" asked the landlord, turning to Rigetto. "Have you money?" "I've something better," answered the old gnome, and taking a bag from one of his pockets, he poured from it upon the table a mass of glittering gems, diamonds, rubies, and emeralds. The landlord was very polite to the strangers after that. He served them an excellent supper, and while they ate it, the high-up boy asked his companion, "Where did you get so many jewels?" "Well, I'll tell you," answered the Gnome King. "When those people of Oz took my kingdom away from me, just because it was my kingdom, and I wanted to run it to suit myself, they said I could take as many precious stones as I could carry. So I had a lot of pockets made in my clothes and loaded them up. Jewels are fine things to have when you travel. You can trade them for anything." "Are they better than gold pieces?" asked Kiki. "The smallest of these jewels is worth 100 gold pieces, such as you stole from the old man." "Don't talk so loud," begged Kiki uneasily. "Someone might hear what you are saying." After supper, they took a walk together, and the former Gnome King said, "Do you know the Shaggy Man, and the Scarecrow, and the Tin Woodman, and Dorothy, and Ozma, and all the other Oz people?" "No," replied the boy. "I have never been away from Mount Munch until I flew over the Deadly Desert the other day in the shape of a hawk." "Then you've never seen the Emerald City of Oz?" "Never." "Well," said the Gnome King, "I knew all the Oz people, and you can guess I do not love them. All during my wanderings I have brooded on how I can be revenged on them. Now that I've met you, I can see a way to conquer the land of Oz and be king there myself, which is better than being king of the gnomes." "How can you do that?" inquired Kiki Aru wonderingly. "Never mind how. In the first place, I'll make a bargain with you. Tell me the secret of how to perform transformations, and I will give you a pocketful of jewels, the biggest and finest that I possess." "No," said Kiki, who realized that to share his power with another would be dangerous to himself. "I'll give you 2 pocketfuls of jewels," said the gnome. "No," answered Kiki, "I'll give you every jewel I possess." "No, no, no," said Kiki, who was beginning to be frightened. "Then," said the gnome, with a wicked look at the boy, "I'll tell the innkeeper that you stole that gold piece, and he will have you put in prison." Kiki laughed at that threat. "Before he can do that," said he, "I will transform myself into a lion and tear him to pieces, or into a bear and eat him up, or into a fly and fly away where he could not find me." "Can you really do such wonderful transformations?" asked the old gnome, looking at him curiously. "Of course," declared Kiki. "I can transform you into a stick of wood in a flash, or into a stone, and leave you here by the roadside." The wicked gnome shivered a little when he heard that, but it made him long more than ever to possess the great secret. And after a while he said, "I'll tell you what I do. If you will help me to conquer Oz and to transform the Oz people, who are my enemies, into sticks and stones, by telling me your secret, I'll agree to make you the ruler of all Oz, and I will be your prime minister and see that your orders are obeyed." "I'll help to do that," said Kiki, "but I won't tell you my secret." The gnome was so furious at this refusal that he jumped up and down with rage and spluttered and choked for a long time before he could control his passion. But the boy was not at all frightened. He laughed at the wicked old gnome, which made him more furious than ever. "Let's give up the idea," he proposed, when Ruggedo had quieted some. "I don't know the Oz people you mention, and so they are not my enemies. If they've kicked you out of your kingdom, that's your affair, not mine." "Wouldn't you like to be king of that splendid fairyland?" asked Ruggedo. "Yes, I would," replied Kiki-Aru. "But you want to be king yourself, and we would quarrel over it." "No," said the Gnome King, trying to deceive him. "I don't care to be king of Oz. Come to think it over, I don't even care to live in that country. What I want first is revenge. If we can conquer Oz, I'll get enough magic then to conquer my own kingdom of the gnomes, and I'll go back and live in my underground caverns, which are more home-like than the top of the earth. So here's my proposition. Help me conquer Oz and get revenge, and help me get the magic away from Glenda and the wizard, and I'll let you be king of Oz forever afterward." "I'll think it over," answered Kiki, and that was all he would say that evening. In the night, when all in the inn were asleep but himself, old Ruggedo the gnome rose swiftly from his couch and went into the room of Kiki-Aru the High-Up and searched everywhere for the magic tool that performed his transformations. Of course, there was no such tool, and although Ruggedo searched in all the boy's pockets, he found nothing magical whatever. So he went back to bed and began to doubt that Kiki could perform transformations. Next morning he said, "Which way do you travel today?" "I think I shall visit the Rose Kingdom," answered the boy. "That is a long journey," declared the gnome. "I shall transform myself into a bird," said Kiki, "and so fly to the Rose Kingdom in an hour." "Then transform me also into a bird, and I will go with you," suggested Ruggedo. "But in that case, let us fly together to the land of Oz and see what it looks like." Kiki thought this over. Pleasant as were the countries he had visited, he had heard everywhere that the land of Oz was more beautiful and delightful. The land of Oz was his own country, too, and if there was any possibility of his becoming its king, he must know something about it. While Kiki the High-Up thought, Ruggedo the gnome was also thinking. This boy possessed a marvelous power, and although very simple in some ways, he was determined not to part with his secret. However, if Ruggedo could get him to transport the wily old gnome to Oz, which he could reach in no other way, he might then induce the boy to follow his advice and enter into the plot for revenge, which he had already planned in his wicked heart. "There are wizards and magicians in Oz," remarked Kiki after a time. "They might discover us in spite of our transformations." "Not if we are careful," Ruggedo assured him. "Ozma has a magic picture, in which she can see whatever she wishes to see. But Ozma will know nothing of our going to Oz, and so she will not command her magic picture to show where we are or what we are doing. Glenda the Good has the great book called the Book of Records, in which is magically written everything that people do in the land of Oz, just the instant they do it." "Then," said Kiki, "there is no use to our attempting to conquer the country, for Glenda would read in her book all that we do, and as her magic is greater than mine, she would soon put a stop to our plans." "I said people, didn't I?" retorted the gnome. "The book doesn't make a record of what birds do or beasts. It only tells the doings of people. So if we fly to the country as birds, Glenda won't know anything about it." "Two birds couldn't conquer the land of Oz," asserted the boy scornfully. "No, that's true," admitted Ruggedo, and then he rubbed his forehead and stroked his long pointed beard and thought some more. "Ah, now I have an idea," he declared. "I suppose you can transform us into beasts as well as birds." "Of course." "And can you make a bird a beast and a beast a bird again, without taking a human form in between?" "Certainly," said Kiki. "I can transform myself or others into anything that can talk. There's a magic word that must be spoken in connection with the transformations, and as beasts and birds and dragons and fishes can talk in Oz, we may become any of these we desire to. However, if I transformed myself into a tree, I would always remain a tree, because then I could not utter the magic word to change the transformation." I see," said Ruggedo, nodding his bushy white head until the point of his hair waved back and forth like a pendulum. "That fits in with my exact idea exactly. Now listen, and I'll explain to you my plan. We'll fly to Oz as birds and settle in one of the thick forests in the Gillikin country. There, you will transform us into the powerful beasts, and as Glenda doesn't keep track of the doings of beasts, we can act without being discovered." "But how can two beasts raise an army to conquer the powerful people of Oz?" inquired Kiki. "Oh, that's easy, but not an army of people, mind you. That would be quickly discovered. And while we are in Oz, you and I will never resume our human forms until we've conquered the country and destroyed Glenda and Ozma and the Wizard and Dorothy and all the rest, and so have nothing more to fear from them." "It is impossible to kill anyone in the land of Oz," declared Kiki. "It isn't necessary to kill the Oz people," rejoined Ruggedo. "I'm afraid I don't understand you," objected the boy. "What will happen to the Oz people, and what sort of an army could we get together, except for people?" "I'll tell you. The forests of Oz are full of beasts. Some of them, in faraway places, are savage and cruel, and would gladly follow a leader as savage as themselves. They have never troubled the Oz people much, because they had no leader to urge them on. But we will tell them to help us conquer Oz, and as a reward, we will transform them, all the beasts, into men and women, and let them live in the houses and enjoy all the good things. And we will transform all the people of Oz into beasts of various sorts, and send them to live in the forests and the jungles. That is a splendid idea, you must admit, and it's so easy that we won't have to trouble at all to carry it through to success." "Will the beasts consent?" asked the boy. "To be sure they will. We can get every beast in Oz on our side, except for a few who live in Ozma's palace, and they won't count." And that's the end of Chapter 3 and the end of our reading of our new book today. I hope you're enjoying this. It's a fun start to a book, and we'll have to tune in on Monday to find out if our friends do go to Oz and try to conquer it. So I hope you do come back, as we will spend roughly the next 2 weeks reading this book, and then start on the 14th book after that. So do come back Monday, and we'll find out what happens more with Kiki and the Gnome King. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful weekend.